नारायणाय विद्महे वासुदेवाय धीमहि तन्नो विष्णुः प्रचोदयात्.
But a lot of people don't know about the Hindu Holocaust. A lot of people don't know that for almost 1,000 years, there was a systematic attempt to kill Hindus, destroy their culture. Every single Hindu temple in all of North India was destroyed, every single brick taken apart. Their books were burnt. Nalanda University, among other universities, were burnt to the ground. Nalanda University was a university in North India with 50,000 students. The Muslims tried to kill as many as they could. They burnt the libraries. They burnt the university to the ground. Then the British come in, and this is the difference between the Islamic conquerors versus the British conquerors, as I stated. The Islamic conquerors tried to physically annihilate Sanatana Dharma. The British conquerors tried to psychologically annihilate Sanatana Dharma by explaining to these poor little brown Hindus that they are inferior in every way, that they should learn from the British, that they should convert to our religion, that they should start drinking tea at 4 o'clock, that they should learn all of our academic ways, that they should, abandon this foolish, childish mythology. What is this Krishna? What are all these people? No. That went on for 300 years. As a result, what you find in the typical Indian Hindu of today, and again, as I say this, and I'm being filmed saying this, this is not a controversial statement. I have spoken to, at this point, thousands of Indian Hindus who themselves will state this very, very boldly. What you find today is an Indian Hindu community that is psychologically traumatized. And as a result, they don't have a lot of pride in who they are. They don't have a lot of knowledge about their tradition, and they certainly don't have a lot of pride in who they are as a people or as a religion. And it's unfortunate. That's something that needs to change. Everyone has a right to be proud of who they are. Everyone. So that's another reason why. At that point, especially in the late 1900s, for the typical Indian Hindu, even if they knew what Max Muller's motivations were, they just didn't have the internal strength really to fight back anyway. Today is a different story. Today is a very different story. Now,
is Hindu still, India is still under the influence of the British in Western ways, or changing?
Actually, and I don't want to talk too much about India per se, because I always try to keep India and Sanatana Dharma separate, but let's talk about it at least from the context of, let's say, the history of Sanatana Dharma. In Dharmic India, or let's say India, has gone through 3 oppressive ideological, let's say, overlords. The first one was Islam, where again the Muslims came in. And interestingly, again, the Muslims were just barbaric. They just killed everyone. If they saw a Hindu temple, they would just destroy it. If they saw, here's a Bhagavad Gita, burn it. They were just barbaric. That went on for about 700 years. Then you had the British, and that was much lighter. Again, it was more of a psychological battering. That went on for 300 years. What India itself has been experiencing for the past roughly 65 years or so, something like that, since independence, has been Marxist oppression. A lot of people do not know this. India has been a Marxist nation, a socialist nation, a radical, secularist, atheistic nation, at least as far as the government, since independence. It's amazing. It always makes me very frustrated when people have this idea that, yes, if you go to India, the government is all Hindu, and yes, they must all support Hinduism, and the government is interested in helping Hinduism. No, the government actually of India has been interested in destroying Hinduism even more so than the British, and a lot of people don't know this. Under the British, for example, the British saved Hinduism. Again, the Muslims were going to physically annihilate it. When the British finally came, again, they stopped that. They stopped a Holocaust that was happening. Psychologically, they began battering the Hindus, but at least now the Hindus had the freedom to rebuild their schools, rebuild their temples, which is what they did. And interestingly, when India became independent, Under their first Prime Minister, Nehru, almost every single Sanskrit school was closed. A lot of people don't know that. There were thousands of Sanskrit schools. By the time Nehru was done, there were, I think, 300 left, traditional Sanskrit schools. I can go on and on about his policies, but the policy has actually been to repress Hinduism within India all this time. Yeah, it's very interesting. Anyway, again, I don't want to go so much into the politics of India, but there is almost no Indian Hindu who would disagree with what I just said. I mean, this is very, very well known. Nehru was an atheist. He was the first prime minister. Again, he was a friend of Gandhi. Oh, but they radically disagreed on everything. Nehru was an atheist. He was not spiritual in any way. He saw the Soviet Union, Stalin's Soviet Union at the time. Oh, Stalin's Soviet Union, because Stalin was alive, when India became independent. He saw Stalin's Soviet Union as the economic model for India. And he tried to essentially create an economy for India modeled on the Soviet Union. Well, we know what happened to the Soviet Union. Well, that's also what happened to India. That's why India has been in poverty all this time. All these stereotypes, all these things that we hear about all the poverty in India, there's only one reason why India has been in poverty for the last 65 years. They followed the Soviet model. Finally, in I think 92, 93, I forget the exact year, they began to abandon that and allow more free enterprise. Now, of course, it's only since then that now we're talking about the economic boom in India, and how by 2020, approximately, India will be a superpower, an economic, military, cultural superpower. Why? Because they abandoned socialism. Socialism doesn't work. It's foreign to the human soul. Freedom is inherent in the human soul. It didn't work in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed. India almost collapsed until they finally abandoned this collectivist model. But again, a lot of people don't understand that if you go to India and if you speak to any government representative, you're going to be speaking to a person who represents essentially a radically secularized ideology. Yeah. So again, there is no Dharma Nation today. There is no overt Dharma Nation today, anywhere on the face of the earth. Instantiated. Politically instantiated. There is a Dharma Nation. There is a Dharma Rashtra. But it exists within the hearts and minds of those individuals who understand Dharma. As far as I'm concerned, there is an invisible Dharma Nation, and it will become manifest again in concrete form. But the last Dharma Nation again was Nepal, at least nominally, at least on paper. Before that, it was Tibet. And really, you could say, if anything, in a way, the last Dharma Nation today is the Tibetan government in exile. The Dalai Lama being the Chakravartin, being the Dharma emperor, because that's the role that he fulfills. But again, it's just a shadow. It's a government in exile. He has no power. It's not a real nation. So really, there is no Dharma Nation. It's just a nice idea. Well, we will see Dharma Nations born again. Many of them. And as I love to point out to people, the first one will not be in India. It's going to surprise people where it will be. So, what happened in the history specifically of India is just a small part of what's happened in the Kali Yuga. Yeah, just a small part of what's happened in the Kali Yuga. Dharma, Dharma has been under attack for 2,000 years. What we've seen is Dharma, that is natural law, receding more and more and more and more to the point where now, truthfully, it doesn't exist. Truthfully, again, instantiated. It exists among individuals, but Dharma instantiated doesn't exist anymore. And according to the scriptures, that is the worst of times. When you have not even one government on earth, not even one people who try to govern their society in accordance with Dharma. That's the darkest of the dark. And right now there isn't any. But we've seen this happen very slowly, little by little. And again, this is why I always need to point this out again and again. This is so crucial if we're going to understand what is the essence of Sanatana Dharma. We have to get this India out of our mind. We have to get this out of our mind. If we want to understand what is the essence of Sanatana Dharma, it is natural law. It is understanding the inherent natural principles that are there within the very structure of the cosmos, and which, if we live in accordance with those principles, with Dharma, we have personal happiness and social prosperity and progress and all these wonderful things. When we reject Dharma or the natural way, we have the opposite. We have degeneration of society. If we understand that as the ideological foundation of Dharma, we understand that Dharma existed in every ancient culture in the world. The ancient Celts tried to run their societies under this same principle. The ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the ancient Mayans, the ancient Chinese. This idea of Dharma, again, in this more expansive philosophical sense, was the predominant worldview of the earth at one time. This is also why we have to throw out this word Hindu. I'm not saying that the ancient Irish Celts were Hindu. They were not Hindu, but they were dharmic. They understood these natural principles. They understood karma and reincarnation. Was it Julius Caesar? I forget who it was. It was some historian who wrote about the ferocity of the Celtic warriors, how they had no fear. And he stated very specifically in Latin, the reason why they have no fear is because their understanding is that even if their body dies, they go on and they reincarnate. They believe that they're an eternal soul. As a result, when they fight our Roman legions, they hurl themselves at us with no fear. So even 2,000 years ago, people were writing about this. People throughout the world understood karma, reincarnation. They understood the idea that we are eternal spirit, that we're not the body. The body is temporal. This world is temporal. What is important is to grasp the infinite and the eternal. This was something every ancient culture understood. This is what it meant to be human. At one point, you weren't considered human if you didn't understand that. You were a barbarian if you didn't understand spiritual truth. Spiritual truth. So, what we've seen is the systematic dismantling of Dharma philosophically, culturally, for 2,000 years. We saw it happen.
Narayanaya vidmahe Vasudevaya dhimahi Tanno Vishnu prachodayat Narayanaya vidmahe Vasudevaya dhimahi Tanno Vishnu prachodayat